We really need to talk about how to buy a handpan. In this video, I'm going to recommend some scales that you might want to choose, how to choose which material you want, what maker you should buy from, and how to find them, how to find the perfect handpan for you. But first, what we really need to do is talk about what not to buy. So there are a lot of companies and websites out there now that are selling handpans that are not great quality. Some of them arrive sounding like they are good quality, but then they very quickly lose their tuning. And the problem with buying from these websites is that it's impossible to then send it back and have it retuned, which any other legitimate maker would be able to do for you. So let's see how you can spot those websites, how you can make sure that you're buying a legitimate handpan that is going to last you, that's going to sound nice, that you're going to be inspired by. First of all, don't buy off Amazon. Be wary of eBay. Sometimes there are some second-hand handpans on there that are quite good, but generally just be cautious. Etsy is also a little bit dubious. Basically, any website that isn't specifically just a selling handpan website is, for the most part, a big no-go. If you do come across a website that is just for selling handpans, again, there are some things to look out for that indicate that it's not a website you should be buying from. There are some dropshipping distribution type websites that are starting to appear quite a lot that basically bring in cheap imports and immediately send them out every time you purchase. And the person that's running that website doesn't even see the handpan, doesn't necessarily have a close relationship with whoever is making them. And so you won't get any support or help once you've purchased that instrument. And a lot of the time, these cheap imports are not brilliant quality. And so if you do drop it or it is out of tune after shipping or whatever, a lot of makers are unwilling to actually tune them for you because they're often not built very well. They're built in such a way that actually it's sometimes impossible to tune it. And it's just not worth their time or your money. So things to look out for on those websites are this. Strange product titles like D minor, handpan, tongue drum, tambourine is one I saw recently, which is like, it's got the name of 3 different instruments in the product listing, so they clearly don't know what they're selling. If they don't have videos on every single listing of that specific handpan, then don't trust it. You need to make sure that you can hear it before you buy it. Some websites arrange their handpans by colour and ability level, which most other makers and legitimate websites wouldn't do because that's not typically how you would choose to buy a handpan. Most websites from actual handpan builders will also have like images of the process of building. They'll have clear contact details so that you can reach out and talk about what scale you might want to make. They'll often also have an option to order custom scales because for the most part, handpans are actually made to order. You can't just pick them up off the shelf. That's changing now as more and more are becoming available, but usually the option is at least there, and that's often the preferred option, is to have a handpan made specifically for you. As well, if you're looking at instruments that are under $700, 700 euros, any currency, definitely no. It's most likely not going to be a good instrument. It costs hundreds to actually get the materials in the first place, plus labour and all of that stuff. Basically anything less than £1,000 is usually too good to be true, with some exceptions like new builders just appearing on the scene or prototypes, things like that, second-hand handpans. You can get them for maybe £800, £900, but in general, make sure you know what you're buying if it's less than £1,000. So there are some exceptions to the rules with regards to websites that have lots of different instruments on them. If those instruments are all handpans, then there might be some good guys amongst all of the mess as well. Examples of that would be Handpan 360, Planet Handpan over in the US. Your Tao shop has some good instruments on there. Master The Handpan.com also has a shop on there. One thing that I would be wary of is that the Tao shop sells from different very legit, very good makers, but also sells imported instruments as well. The Pan is a Chinese-made handpan with their logo put on it, which again runs into the same issue of if it's out of tune when it arrives, if something happens, if you need support, you don't have a direct relationship with the maker, you can't get it fixed, or it's very difficult to get it fixed. Personally, I'm not into it. For me, I'm not a big fan of buying any instrument that I can't have a relationship with the builder. I am a big fan of accessibility, and if you need to buy something cheaper in order to get into this world, and you know that actually it might look like you're going to end up buying something, saving up and getting something higher quality, then great. If that's like literally the only way you can do it, then I think that's fine. But there are ways around that. There are tongue drums that can be very high quality but very cheap. I started on a tongue drum before I could afford a handpan. Then at least you're playing something that's in tune. It's very hard to develop as a player. It's very hard to feel like you can make any progress or feel like you can connect with an instrument and actually play something nice if what you receive just sounds clangy and metallic and out of tune. It's going to be very dissatisfying and might even discourage you from continuing. So yeah, I do recommend, if you're able, to just save up just a little bit and buy something that you know is going to be good. So I mentioned a couple of other distribution websites that are good distribution websites, and the reason that we know they are good is because often whoever runs that website is not afraid to put their face all over it. Often those people are also respected players in the community already, or they're teachers. Maybe these websites offer courses or private one-to-one lessons. You can easily get in touch with them to talk about what scale might be good for you. Often they'll stock pans from different makers, but not like a ton of different makers, and then there will be information about who those makers are, so that you know, again, where it's coming from. And you can see that there is a clear relationship between the person who's running that website and the person who is building the instruments that they are then stocking on that website. Usually these websites are built in collaboration between players and builders to help build those bridges between the two, so that, you know, I can kind of browse and say, oh, I didn't know that handpan maker existed. Oh, let's look at the videos of those exact handpans. Oh my gosh, this one's great. This one is also great, but maybe not my thing, or, you know. So it kind of, those usually have such a clear way to navigate that actually they answer more questions than they raise. So yeah, be very, very careful and just have a look and make sure that there aren't any red flags on a website before buying. Alright, once you know how to avoid the scary stuff, let's look at how to actually choose the handpan that is right for you. What I would like to avoid in this video is saying the name of a builder and saying they are good, buy from them. I think everybody's taste is different. What I love might be different from what you love, so I want to give you the tools to be able to do your own research and decide what's best for you. There are lots of different ways that you can explore handpans and listen to different scales, different materials and stuff, get some recommendations online now. There is the Handpan Makers Directory on masterthehandpan.com, which you can even input your country, where you live, where you're from, or where you want to buy from, and it will give you a list of builders in that area with rating on price. It gives you a little list of what players in the community play their instrument, and then links to their websites and stuff, so you can check those out. You can utilize Facebook community groups, Handpan Community, Handpan Instruments, Handpan Swap and Sale, where people actually sell secondhand instruments. These, for the most part, always have legitimate handpans on them, and it's full of handpan nerds, so you can ask questions and people will want the best for you and freely give you lots of information. It's a really good place. Subreddit as well as a handpan subreddit that you can check out. YouTube is an incredible resource for looking up different handpans. Find players that you like and styles of playing that you like, and see what instruments they are playing. Because typically, if you like that style of playing and that's what you want to do, the instrument that they're playing will be good for that style and therefore will be good for you. So make sure you give yourself time, don't rush into it, to explore and listen and ask questions. Don't be afraid to reach out to the community, because most of us are very, very willing to help. So, materials. When you first start looking, you'll notice that there are a couple of different main types that are available on the market. There are stainless steel instruments and there are nitrided instruments. There are a few other variations, but these are the main kind of the two umbrellas, if you like, that you will want to explore and decide which is best for you. So the nitrided, and I have an example here, this is how handpans were originally built. They were made from, this is a raw steel that has been heat treated, and this is called the nitriding process, to make it corrosion resistant and to give it a nice kind of ceramic texture to it. This particular one is from Koru Handpans, who is a new builder here in the UK. I think his prices are still very reasonable at the minute, and his instruments are very good quality. So just a quick little example of what it sounds like. This is a D Celtic scale. It's a variation on a D minor. So yeah, that's what the nitrided steel looks and sounds like. Typically they are good for more percussive style playing because they don't have as long a sustain. They're very warm, but they're also a little bit more dull so that you can really go for it, percussive playing wires. Stainless steel on the other hand, and I have one here which is very similar to the scale that I just played. This is from Meridian Handpans. This is one of the instruments that I generally play the most. It's a D kurd, so it's very similar to the D Celtic, it's just got one extra note, makes it a little bit more versatile. It's also what most teachers teach on. So if you're wanting to get a handpan and then just dive into studying, this is a very good place to start. It's a very good scale to begin with. So the stainless steel, the good thing about this is that it is rust resistant. It's much easier to look after. Sometimes the colouring will change on it depending on where you store it and depending on the oils of your skin. This is just the patina changing on the surface. It's not rust. It's absolutely fine. I think it looks kind of cool when that starts happening, personally. So this is what the stainless steel sounds like. As you can hear, the scale is very similar to what I just played, but it has a much longer sustain to it. Still going. Stainless steel sounds like. And Meridian I find are particularly bright in their tone. Same with Elaia that I've also got an example of here as well. Some makers like to control their sound a little bit more and go for depth rather than sustain. So I encourage you to listen out to a bunch of different makers to see what kind of tonal quality and texture you like. I personally love the brightness, that's why Meridian are one of my favourites. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best for you. I think they're amazing. I think the high notes especially are so pristine and crisp. They're my instrument of choice, but don't just go with it because I said it's good. If there's one thing to take away from this video, is just don't just blindly take recommendations because it might not be for you. So those are the difference between stainless steel and nitrided steel. Think about what kind of playing you might want to do. Maybe you were a percussionist in a previous life, or you are a percussionist and you want to kind of play loads of cool grooves. Maybe nitrided is better. Maybe you want to meditate with it, play calmly. In that case, stainless might be better for you. Let's talk about frequencies. This is a little bit of a tricky topic. And it's a little bit controversial. So there are two types of handpan that you might come across when reading up online. There is 440 Hz in there is 432 Hz. All notes are tuned to a specific frequency. Now, pre-1940s maybe, there was no consistent frequency. Basically, an orchestra would tune to itself, but that meant that another orchestra on the other side of the world might not be, when they play an A on their violin, it might not sound exactly the same as the A on a violin on the other side of the world. So what ended up happening with globalization and touring and that kind of thing is there was a decision that needed to be made, which was we need to choose a specific frequency to make sure that wherever we are, whatever musician we play with, we're going to be in tune with each other. Our A's are going to sound the same. The decision was made, 440 Hz, it's going to be that. Now, a lot of people say, and there is some evidence to suggest, that 432 Hz, when the A is tuned just a few cents lower to 432 instead of 440, this is supposed to be much more grounding, very good for you kind of on a vibrational, meditational, healing kind of level. Now, a lot of the research that has gone into this is mostly anecdotal or small studies. Personally, I'm not entirely sure how true all of this is. I just know that I find handpans healing in general, and whatever I play after I've played it, I feel amazing. And I've been to sound healing sessions, and I've been to handpan concerts, and I've been to a mix of the two, and I've also spent many hours playing my handpans just for the purpose of meditation or self-soothing or emotional regulation, all this kind of stuff. And I personally find it to be very, very healing. I play 440 Hz. I think for me it doesn't really matter, basically, what that frequency is. I think handpans are brilliant anyway. But the benefit of 440 is that I know that I can also jam with any other instrument. I can play with a guitar player, I can play with another handpan player, I can play with someone across the world that I've just met who plays bassoon, I don't know, and it's going to be in tune because I'm playing the standard tuning. So one thing to note, if you do want to go down that healing path and that's the right path for you, brilliant. But one thing to note is that it will sound slightly flat and out of tune with other instruments and most other handpans. So bear that in mind if you might want to play with other instruments and jam with other people. It's just something to be aware of if you do decide to buy 432. I think both brilliant. I think handpans are healing, whatever. So yeah, I'll let you decide which one of those you want to choose. Okay, so finally, this is the exciting part, choosing your scale. People often reach out to me and ask what scale I think they should buy, or at the end of workshops, like, I want to buy a handpan, what scale should I get? And I find it so difficult to answer because it's such a personal thing. And by the way, if you end up buying the wrong instrument for you, it's not impossible to resell. People are always looking for second-hand handpans, so it's not the end of the world, don't panic. But yeah, in choosing a scale, I already mentioned that the D kurd is a very common scale amongst teachers and online teachers as well. I teach with a D kurd, so if you're looking to study, this is a really good place to start. However, let's explore some other scales to make sure that you find something that you do connect with. So, the D kurd, very, very common. The great thing about this scale as well is that it contains all 7 notes of the minor scale. So handpans are confusing in that in handpan world, we use the word scale to mean actually the layout of the instrument. It doesn't necessarily mean the literal scale in terms of like Western music theory. So this is a D minor. This is also a D minor. The scale name of this is D kurd. The scale name of that one is D Celtic. Kurd and Celtic don't mean anything in music theory and in any other music context. It's just in handpan world, we just come up with nice pretty names for some reason. And it refers to the layout, the way that the notes are laid out. So these are 2 variations on the minor scale. Another variation on the minor scale is Pygmy. Another variation, low Pygmy. Integral. There are so many, and it refers to the layout and also the mode and which notes from the scale you're choosing in order to get the sound of the handpan that you want. So this is a full D minor scale. means it's very versatile. You've got loads of different chords at your disposal, loads of different melodies. It's good for a beginner because lots of teachers teach on it, but it's also good for further down the line as you develop your playing because it's always going to give you more. It's very, very versatile. I like it because I can write songs on it, sing with it, that kind of thing. Another very popular scale is the Pygmy scale. So I have a handpan here from Elaia Handpans, and this is a C-sharp Pygmy. It sounds like this. It's also got some bottom notes, we'll talk about that later. So the Pygmy is it a pentatonic or does it have 6 notes? I think it's 6 notes. I've actually got some extra notes underneath as well. It's another variation on the minor scale. A lot of people who play meditative type stuff play in Pygmy scales. And also the C sharp is just a little bit lower than the D as well, so that lower pitch also feels nice for meditative type playing. I think they're very pretty. I haven't played Pygmy in all of my handpan career, which is almost 10 years, until the last few months, and I've fallen in love with it. But I went all of this time playing the D minor scale and the E major scale, and only now I've recently fallen in love with Pygmies. Now, one very important thing to note is that the Pygmy scale is different from the low Pygmy scale. And low Pygmy does not mean very low top note. A lot of people get mixed up. A popular low Pygmy scale is the F low Pygmy, which is this. This is the F low Pygmy. You'll notice this F isn't a super deep F. It's not an F2. Low doesn't mean deep scale. It means it's a different layout to the Pygmy. So the Pygmy jumps between the ding and the first note, so you can play them together and they sound nice. This one, the ding and note 1 are actually very close together in the scale, so when you play them together it clashes. So the whole scale starts very low. That's how I remember the difference in layout. The Pygmy jumps, so you've got a low ding and then it jumps up the scale, I think a fourth, and then you play the rest of the scale slightly higher up. This continues with the scale straight away and you start on the lower end of it. So it is a different scale to the Pygmy. Just because you've got a low Pygmy doesn't mean you're going to get a low ding. So when you're looking out for that, if you want a deep instrument, like an F2 for example, and I don't have any handpans that are F2, but I do have a RAV that is F2. next to the letter name, and that means it's the second, in this case F, on piano on the keyboard, which means it's actually really quite low. This one is an F3, so it's an octave above that, starts an octave higher than that. While I've got a RAV in my hand, if budget is an issue for you, then this is another good route. If you can't afford to buy a high quality handpan yet, but you're interested in playing something like it, you could look into tongue drums. Now they are very different because the process of making them is very different. They are cut tongues rather than hammered notes. They're very different in quality. They have a much longer sustain. They feel different to play, but they're the same layout. So it's the same motions, you can practice the same motions, and you can dip your toe into the world of handpan type instruments, and they're much cheaper as well. So it's a good way in. They are a completely different instrument though, so bear that in mind. And if you are interested in a RAV as well, I do have a discount code in the description below. So this is an F Astronaut from RAV Vast. Minor scales. So let's look at an example of a major scale. And I only have one in the room. And that is this. It's an E Sabye. Now, the good thing about this one is just like the D kurd, it contains all of the notes of a major scale, so it's very versatile. But you can also play this in a more moody way. Just like with the kurd, you can very easily get a more happy sound out of it. It doesn't have to always be sad because it's got all of the notes. It's easy to make those transitions. So that's a major scale. This is another Meridian Handpan. So like I said, when choosing your scales, most importantly find something that really sings to you, that you really love the sound of, that you can see yourself playing for hours and hours and hours to come. And if you have the opportunity to actually find a maker vaguely near you and drive over and try out some scales, I highly recommend that. If you don't have that, then listen to as many different scales as possible. And if that just freaks you out and there are too many options and you don't know what to do, a good start is usually the D kurd, because at least then you're going to be able to follow any tutorial for the most part online. The vast majority of teachers use the D kurd, so you'll be able to pick it up and learn quite quickly, and then if you don't connect with that in the end, you can sell it and you can get into the scale. So that's a little intro to how to choose a scale that works for you. What I've showed you just now, apart from two of these instruments, was mostly unextended scales. But you can have extended versions. So for instance, this D kurd doesn't just have these 9 notes on top, it also has some bottom notes. I've extended this instrument with some deep bottom notes here. And what that does is it allows me to just have a little bit more depth in what I'm playing. I played a scale that was just this many notes without this top one for about 6-7 years, maybe 6 years, 5 or 6 years, and that did me just fine. But now it's really nice to have these different bass notes. What the bass notes do is they allow you to route what you're playing in a different key if you wanted to. So I can play in D minor, or I can play in C major, because I've got a low C and I've got almost all of the notes on here of the C major scale. I could play in F major. Into D minor there. Or I could just make cool bass lines. If I wanted to take my melody further, I can also extend that. Just like that. Or there are other options. You could extend. For some scales it's easier than others. You could extend by having a mutant handpan. Mutant is when you have extra notes on an inner circle on top of the instrument. So here, which is much easier to play, especially for those of us with shorter arms. These are some other ways that you can, layouts that you can have that extend your scales. I don't think it's necessary to start with extended scales, but if you see yourself playing for a long time, if you see yourself really composing and exploring extended melodies, creating those bass lines, if you want the ability to play in different keys, if that's something that you know how to kind of dive into that world of transposition on one instrument, then extended scales are for you. If you're a beginner in music completely and all of that's just like, what does that even mean? And don't worry about it too much. Obviously, the more notes you add, the more expensive it's going to get. And as soon as you do start adding extra notes, usually these are custom orders as well. So you can have conversations with whoever you're choosing to buy from to decide what's going to work for you. Basically, whatever you choose, have a conversation with somebody who can build it for you. And they can say, okay, that's a really cool scale, but actually realistically, if we build that, it's not quite going to sound the same because these notes interact with each other in this way, etc., etc. So you can have those honest conversations and see what's gonna work for you. Yeah, once you've got one and you want to learn how to play, check out my other videos. I've got hundreds of tutorials, literally, for free, that you can follow along and learn at your own pace. So, yeah, all right, see you later.